The first spark of power. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting an eerie glow over the barren landscape below. In the deep, forgotten caves of Earth, a group of scientists stood around an ancient relic, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. The artifact, long buried beneath layers of dust and rock, was like nothing they had ever seen before. Its surface hummed with a strange energy that seemed to vibrate in the air itself. Dr. Ethan Rayner, the lead scientist, cautiously approached the artifact. His hand shook slightly as he touched its smooth, metallic surface. For years, humanity had searched for something to explain the unexplainable, a key to unlock powers beyond their understanding. And here it was, right in front of him. A weapon or a tool. He didn't know, but it held power. Undeniable power. "We've found it," Dr. Rayner muttered, staring in awe at the glowing lines etched into the artifact's surface. "This is what we've been searching for." The rest of the team stood still, waiting for him to say more, but Dr. Rayner could only shake his head. There were no words. The artifact was ancient, older than any human civilization. It had been hidden, kept away from the world for reasons unknown. And yet here it was, waiting to be unlocked. "What is it?" asked Dr. Helen Moore, one of the younger scientists on the team, her voice filled with both fear and excitement. Rayner hesitated, looking at the others. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but whatever it is, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered." The artifact pulsed again, and then, in an instant, the ground beneath their feet shook violently. The scientists stumbled, trying to keep their balance, as the walls of the cave trembled. Something in the air shifted. A low hum filled the space, vibrating in the very bones of those present. They all knew it was no longer just a relic. It was alive. Suddenly, the artifact emitted a blinding flash of light. Dr. Rayner, unable to shield his eyes in time, felt a sharp pain in his head as the light pierced through him. His vision blurred, and he felt his body become weightless, as if he were floating in the air. And then, as suddenly as it began, the light disappeared. The cave fell into an unnatural silence. Rayner blinked rapidly, trying to clear his mind. What had just happened? He looked around at the others. They were all on the ground now, struggling to regain their composure. He slowly sat up, the pain in his head still lingering but fading quickly. "What was that?" Helen asked, still on the floor, her voice shaking. Rayner stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. He could feel something had changed. Something had shifted within him, deep inside. He felt stronger, more alive than ever. And it wasn't just him. He looked at his colleagues, and they too seemed different. Their eyes were brighter, their movements faster. But it wasn't just physical. There was a strange connection between them all now, an unspoken understanding. They were no longer just scientists. They had become something else, something more. Rayner took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I don't know what just happened, but it's clear this artifact has given us something. Something we weren't meant to have. We need to study it, figure out what it did to us." Helen nodded, her voice calm but trembling. "We've crossed a line we can't go back from, haven't we?" Rayner looked at her, his mind racing. The power they had unlocked could change everything. There were so many questions. What was this artifact? Why had it been buried here for so long? And most importantly, what had it done to them? "We have to be careful," Rayner said, his voice grim. "If this is what I think it is, it's not just a discovery. It's a warning." The other scientists exchanged nervous glances. They all felt it. This weight, this sense of something far greater than they could comprehend. The artifact hummed once again, its energy pulsing in the room, and Rayner felt a sudden surge of power inside him. It was overwhelming, like nothing he had ever experienced before. It wasn't just physical strength, it was mental, spiritual, and beyond comprehension. But with this new power came a realization. This wasn't just for them. The energy was meant for something more, something bigger. The entire world would be affected by what they had uncovered. As they left the cave, the artifact securely transported back to their research facility, Raynor felt a mix of awe and fear. They had found the key to godlike power, but at what cost? What would humanity do with this newfound strength? And more importantly, what would the galaxy think when they learned of it? In the days that followed, the world would begin to change. The energy from the artifact began to spread, growing stronger and more unpredictable. Governments and militaries around the globe began to harness the power, unaware of the consequences of what they had unleashed. Back on Earth, the world watched in shock as humanity began to show signs of extraordinary strength. Powers that had once been the stuff of legends now manifested in the most unexpected ways. Scientists, soldiers, and ordinary people found themselves transforming, unraveling the mystery of the artifact at an alarming pace. And far, far away, across the stars, a different story was unfolding. The Galactic Empire had long ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, unaware of the forces quietly brewing on a small, insignificant planet called Earth. But soon, they would know. Soon, the entire galaxy would feel the consequences of humanity's rise to godlike power. And the Empire would find out just how far Earth was willing to go to defend itself. The first spark of power had ignited, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Empire's response. The first signs of humanity's newfound power were small, quiet. It started with whispers in the news, strange occurrences that couldn't be explained. A man lifting a car with nothing but his bare hands. A woman creating flames out of thin air. But these were only the beginning. On Earth, scientists and military leaders scrambled to understand what had happened. They had unlocked something ancient, something beyond their wildest dreams. But the world was not ready for this kind of power. The balance had shifted, and with it, the fragile peace that had once governed Earth was beginning to crumble. Dr. Raynor stood in the heart of the world's top research facility, staring at a display showing the global energy readings. The power levels were unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. They were climbing steadily, dangerously. He had to stop it, but deep down, he knew it was already too late. "Raynor," came a voice from behind him. It was Helen, her face pale, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "You need to see this." She handed him a tablet. The screen flickered for a moment, then stabilized, showing the Galactic Empire's response to Earth's rise in power. Raynor's heart sank as he saw the message, transmitted directly from the heart of the Empire's central command. "The Galactic Empire is aware of your awakening." The message read, "We demand you cease all activities immediately or face the consequences." Raynor's hands trembled as he read the words. "This isn't just a warning. They're coming." Helen's voice was barely above a whisper. "The Empire is the most powerful force in the galaxy. If they come here, we won't be ready." Raynor finished for her. Just then, the doors to the lab slammed open, and General Marcus Howard, the leader of Earth's military, stormed into the room. He was a tall man, his face weathered from years of command, but his eyes now held a rare spark of concern. "Raynor, we need to talk." "The Empire is mobilizing," Howard said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. "They've sent a fleet to Earth. They're not just coming to talk. They want to test us, or destroy us." Raynor's mind raced. They hadn't even begun to understand the full extent of the powers humanity now held. But the Empire, they were a force unlike anything Earth had ever faced. If the battle turned to war, they would be outmatched. "We have to be prepared," Raynor said, his voice cold. "This power, we've only just begun to tap into it. We can't just defend ourselves with what we know now. We need to learn more. Fast." Howard nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to use it. Every weapon, every piece of technology at our disposal. And we'll make them understand one thing. Humanity doesn't back down." The tension was palpable as the group gathered in the war room, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of the decisions that had to be made. Humanity's leaders had no choice but to go on the offensive. The Empire had threatened them. It had warned them. And now, there was no turning back. Across the galaxy, deep in the heart of the Galactic Empire, the Imperial fleet gathered. Thousands of warships, each bristling with weapons of unimaginable destruction, prepared to jump through hyperspace toward Earth. The Empire's leaders had underestimated the power of this small, insignificant planet, and they were about to make a grave mistake. On Earth, preparations were underway. The military's warships, some of the most advanced ships ever designed, were being prepared for battle. The power that the humans had unlocked would be their only hope. But the generals knew the truth. Nothing could prepare them for what was coming. The Empire was a juggernaut, and Earth was an untested planet that had just stumbled upon godlike power. "All units are ready," General Howard said, his voice steady as he addressed the gathered soldiers and commanders. "We don't know what the Empire is sending our way, but we will fight. We will fight with everything we have." Raynor stood in the background, his mind still swirling with questions. What were the limits of their newfound power? Could they defend themselves against a fleet that had crushed entire civilizations in the past? And more importantly, could humanity control this power before it consumed them all? The unknown was a terrifying thing, but in the face of this overwhelming threat, humanity had no choice but to face it head-on. They would fight, not just for survival, but to show the galaxy that Earth was no longer weak, no longer insignificant. "Ready the fleet," Raynor said, his voice firm. "And pray we're ready for what comes next." The first strike. The deafening sound of alarms echoed through the command center as the first wave of Imperial warships appeared on Earth's radar. General Howard's face grew pale as he looked at the screen, which now showed a massive fleet, a sea of warships stretching across the stars. Thousands of vessels, each equipped with weapons capable of decimating entire planets, were now only minutes away from Earth's atmosphere. "We can't let them land," Howard said, his voice tight with stress. "We have to engage them before they get any closer." Raynor stood frozen for a moment, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene unfolding before him. The new power humanity had unlocked was their only hope. But the fleet before them was far larger and far more advanced than anything Earth had ever faced. The energy readings were already spiking, the potential for disaster growing with every passing second. "Do we have any chance at all?" Helen Moore asked, her voice shaking as she entered the room. Her usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a palpable fear. "What if we can't control this power? What if it consumes us?" Raynor turned to her, his expression grim but resolute. "We have to try. We've already crossed a line. This is the moment that will decide everything for us." The room was filled with tension as officers scrambled, giving orders, preparing for what was sure to be an earth-shattering conflict. The Empire would not hesitate. The Galactic Empire's history was filled with destruction. But Earth had no intention of going down without a fight. "We're launching the fleet," Howard said firmly. "All units are to engage on my command. Focus fire on the lead ships. We need to disrupt their formation before they land." Raynor felt the air around him crackle with tension. It wasn't just the fleet they had to face. It was the very real threat of their own powers getting out of control. Humanity had tapped into something greater than themselves, something that had been dormant for millennia. What if they couldn't contain it? What if the power they had unleashed was too much for them to control? "Raynor," Helen said softly, her voice laced with doubt. "Do you really think we can do this? Can we stop them?" He looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "We have no choice. If we don't stop them now, the Empire will take everything from us." The first wave of the Imperial fleet appeared in Earth's orbit, their ships glistening in the dark void of space. The size and power of the warships were overwhelming. But humanity had one advantage: the energy from the artifact that had unlocked their new powers. It was still raw, still unpredictable, but they could channel it into their weapons, into their very souls. They had to make it work. They had to fight back. The tension was unbearable. Rayner took a deep breath and stepped forward, his hands hovering over a console. A flicker of energy surged through his fingertips, and he felt it, the connection to the artifact deep within him, a spark of pure power. His mind whirred with possibilities, but now was not the time for hesitation. "All units, launch," Howard shouted. In an instant, the Earth's warships blasted off from their launch pads, piercing the sky with immense force. The sky above the base was filled with the sound of roaring engines as Earth's fleet took to space, the heavy ships now beginning their battle with the Imperial warships. The first salvo of plasma fire shot through the dark sky, aimed directly at the closest Imperial ship. It was a barrage of brilliant blue and red energy that cut through the vacuum, but it barely made a dent in the sleek surface of the enemy vessel. The Empire was relentless. Their ships were heavily armored and equipped with powerful shields that absorbed the energy blasts. "Direct hits," one of the officers called out. "We're not making a dent. They've got shields strong enough to block everything we've got." Rayner's heart sank. The Empire had known they would be outgunned, but this was worse than they could have imagined. He quickly accessed the power readings, desperate for a way to turn the tide. "We need to channel more power into our weapons systems," he said, his voice urgent. "We have to find a way to break through their shields. Focus all our energy into one strike." Helen's eyes widened as she realized what Rayner was suggesting. "You're not." "It's the only option we have," Rayner said quickly, cutting her off. "If we want a chance at winning this, we need to put everything into one attack. And I mean everything." He could feel the energy swirling inside him, but it was unpredictable, dangerous. The power from the artifact was still foreign to them all, a force they hadn't fully comprehended. But desperation bred action, and Rayner knew there was no other way. With a steady hand, Rayner tapped a series of buttons, and the power readings skyrocketed, surpassing anything they had attempted before. The weapon systems on Earth's fleet began to glow with a powerful, blinding light. For a brief moment, Rayner felt the weight of the power, felt it coursing through his veins like fire. "Now," Rayner shouted. The entire fleet unleashed everything they had. A massive beam of energy, brighter than the sun, shot through space toward the lead Imperial ship. The blast collided with the enemy's shield, causing a ripple of energy to surge outward, shaking the very fabric of space. For a moment, it seemed as if nothing had happened. But then, the Empire's shield faltered. It was only for a split second, but that moment of weakness was all the humans needed. The beam pierced the weakened shield, striking the ship directly in its heart. The ship erupted in a fiery explosion, sending debris scattering across space. For the first time, the Empire felt the weight of humanity's power. The Empire strikes back. The atmosphere in the command center grew heavy with tension. Rayner stood frozen in front of the holographic display, his eyes fixed on the massive command ship now emerging from the Imperial fleet. Its sheer size and design were enough to strike terror into any soldier's heart. It was unlike any ship Earth had ever seen, a war machine built for one purpose: to obliterate. Helen Moore, standing beside Rayner, bit her lip nervously. This is something entirely different. We've never faced anything like this before." The entire command room fell silent as the monstrous ship powered up its weapons, its engines glowing ominously in the dark void of space. It was massive, dwarfing the ships Earth had sent into battle, a symbol of the Empire's overwhelming strength, and it was heading straight for them. Rayner clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white, as he stared at the ship on the screen. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a battle for Earth's very existence. The Empire was not going to let this go easily. "We need to stop it before it gets any closer," General Howard said, his voice tight with determination. "We can't let them land." Rayner nodded. "We can't let them take our home. We need to strike before they have a chance to deploy their ground forces." "How are we going to do that?" Helen asked, her voice shaky. "Their ship is huge, and we've already spent most of our firepower on their smaller ships." Rayner turned to her, his face hard. "We use everything we've got. Everything." As the Earth fleet prepared for another round of attacks, Rayner couldn't shake the feeling of dread gnawing at him. They had just managed to defeat one of the smaller Imperial ships, but this new ship was in an entirely different league. It had shields unlike anything they had encountered before, and its weapons were designed to obliterate entire fleets with a single strike. "Sir, all weapons are ready," one of the officers reported, his voice tense. Rayner turned to face him. "We need to hit it with everything we've got. Focus all fire on their weak points. Find an opening." The officer nodded, relaying the orders to the fleet. Ships began to reposition, aligning themselves for the attack. The tension in the room was palpable as Earth's warships began to power up their weapons, preparing for the most intense battle they had ever faced. As they moved into position, the first volley of fire came from the Imperial command ship. The energy blasts tore through space with deadly precision, striking Earth's ships with overwhelming force. Rayner's heart raced as he watched the shields of the closest ships flicker under the onslaught. The fleet was taking heavy fire, but they had no choice but to push forward. The fleet retaliated. A barrage of plasma bolts and energy beams shot toward the Imperial ship, but the sheer size of the enemy vessel allowed it to weather the assault without significant damage. "We can't break through," one of the officers yelled. "Their shields are too strong." Rayner gritted his teeth. They needed a solution, and fast. He could feel the pressure building in his chest, the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. But he had an idea. A risky one. He turned to the lead engineer, a man named Joseph, who had been working tirelessly on the new weapon systems. "Joseph, how close are we to completing the new supercharger?" Rayner asked, his voice urgent. Joseph wiped the sweat from his brow. "We're almost there, sir. We've been testing it for hours, but it's not fully stable. If we fire it at full power, it might overload the system." Rayner's mind raced. The power of the artifact was unstable, but it could be their only chance. "Can we boost the charge to the weapon in time? Just enough to take down their shields?" Joseph hesitated. "It's risky, but if we can channel the artifact's energy into the weapon system, we might be able to do it." Rayner didn't hesitate. "Do it." The ship's systems hummed to life as the supercharged energy system powered up. The engineers worked furiously, rerouting power and activating the backup systems. Rayner could feel the tension in the air, every second stretching like an eternity. "Charge is at 85%, one of the engineers called out. "Almost there." Rayner turned to Helen. "This is it. Either we stop them now, or we lose everything." Helen nodded, her eyes locked on the screen. The command ship was closing in, its weapons charging for another deadly blast. 100%, the engineer shouted. "We're ready to fire." Rayner took a deep breath. Fire. The supercharged beam erupted from the Earth fleet's main cannon, a blinding flash of energy that seemed to tear through the very fabric of space. It surged toward the Imperial command ship, hitting it square in the center. For a brief moment, the enemy ship's shields flickered and sparked, showing signs of weakness. Then the beam broke through. The Imperial ship exploded in a massive burst of light, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The force of the explosion was so powerful that it rocked the entire Earth fleet, knocking several ships off course. The sound of the blast echoed across the void. For a moment, it seemed like the battle was over. But then, the remaining Imperial ships began to regroup. The command ship had been destroyed, but the Empire was not about to back down. More ships, larger and more advanced, began to emerge from the shadows, ready to launch their final assault on Earth. Rayner's heart sank. The battle was far from over. "We've made a dent," General Howard said, his voice filled with determination. "But we need to keep fighting. The Empire won't stop until they've taken everything." Rayner nodded, knowing that Earth's survival was still hanging in the balance. But they had made one thing clear: humanity would not go down without a fight. The coming storm. The sudden appearance of the massive fleet sent shockwaves through the command center. Rayner and his team stared at the monitors in stunned silence as the new fleet entered the system. The ships were unlike anything they had ever seen, sleek, menacing, and far larger than anything the Galactic Empire had deployed so far. "Who are they?" Helen whispered, her voice barely audible as she leaned over the console, scanning the unfamiliar ships. Rayner's face was grim. "I don't know, but they're not here to negotiate." On the holographic map, the new fleet positioned itself in a perfect formation, ready to strike. The ships had a different energy signature from the Imperial fleet, something more advanced and even more dangerous. They moved in unison, a silent promise of annihilation. General Howard turned to Rayner, his face pale. "Sir, this isn't just a military presence. This is an invasion force. These ships, they're not just here to conquer, they're here to wipe us out." Rayner's jaw tightened. "We can't let that happen." He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on his chest. Their fleet, though formidable, had been battered by the Imperial ships. The Earth fleet was still recovering, and they now faced an enemy even more terrifying than anything they had encountered before. "Sir," one of the officers called out, his voice shaking, "the new fleet is sending a transmission. It's being broadcasted directly to us." Rayner nodded. "Put it through." A moment later, the screen flickered to life, and the image of a tall, imposing figure appeared on the monitor. His eyes were cold, calculating, and his expression was one of complete superiority. He wore ornate armor, the insignia of a powerful empire gleaming on his chest. "I am Lord Calthor," the figure spoke, his voice smooth and almost regal. "You have made a grave mistake, humans. The Empire was just the first wave. We are the true force that rules the galaxy, and you have attracted our attention." Rayner could feel the tension in the room rise as Calthor continued. "You have awakened something that should have remained buried, something far worse than you can imagine. Your resistance is futile. Your fate is sealed." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in an eerie silence. "What the hell was that?" General Howard growled, his face flushed with anger. Rayner clenched his fists, his mind racing. "We've been warned, but we can't back down now. We need to find out who these people are and what they want. We can't let them have Earth." The following hours were filled with frantic preparations. Rayner knew the enemy was coming, and Earth had to be ready. The new fleet was massive, but they were not without their own advantages. The weaponry on Earth's ships had been upgraded after the last battle, and the power of the mysterious artifact was still being harnessed. The fleet's supercharged weapon was ready to be fired again, but this time they needed to be smarter, faster. Rayner stood on the bridge of the flagship, looking out at the advancing enemy fleet. The darkness of space stretched before him, a black sea that was about to swallow them whole. Helen joined him, her voice low but filled with resolve. "We need to hit them hard before they can react. If we wait, they'll crush us." Rayner nodded, his eyes never leaving the advancing ships. "Agreed. We can't let them get any closer. We need to strike fast and hit their command ship." The strategy was clear. The command ship was always the heart of the fleet, and if they could destroy it, they might break the enemy's coordination. But the risk was enormous. The ships in this new fleet were far more advanced than anything Earth had seen, and even their best weapons might not be enough. "Target the weak points of the enemy ships," Rayner ordered, his voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. "We'll hit their engines first to slow them down. Then we focus on their weapons." As the orders were relayed to the fleet, Rayner's mind wandered briefly back to the strange transmission from Lord Calthor. Who were these people? What did they mean by something far worse? And most importantly, what was their true goal? The clock was ticking. Rayner walked down the narrow corridor of the ship, his footsteps echoing in the cold silence. He was met by Joseph, the lead engineer, who had been working tirelessly on perfecting the supercharged energy weapon. Joseph looked up, his face tired but determined. "How's the weapon looking?" Rayner asked. "It's ready," Joseph replied, his voice filled with confidence. "We've made some tweaks, but it should be more powerful this time. It's the best chance we got." Rayner's eyes narrowed. "It's not just the weapon we need to worry about. These new ships, they're unlike anything we faced. We need to know what they're capable of. We need to be one step ahead." Joseph nodded. "I'll see what we can do, but we're running out of time." Rayner clapped him on the shoulder. "I know. Just keep it ready. We may need it sooner than we think." The battle was about to begin. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Earth's ships began to power up their engines and weapons. The tension was unbearable. Rayner's eyes were fixed on the battle screen as the first wave of enemy fighters began to break off and charge toward them. "They're coming in fast," Helen called out from the tactical station. "We'll be in range in 2 minutes." Rayner took a deep breath. "All ships, prepare for battle. Take them down before they reach us. Earth will not fall today." The wrath unleashed. The battle raged outside. The skies were a canvas of fiery explosions and energy blasts as the two fleets collided. Earth's ships, though advanced, struggled to keep up with the relentless assault from the alien invaders. Their new fleet was unlike anything the humans had seen, larger, faster, and more deadly. Rayner stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes glued to the battle screens. The enemy fighters darted in and out of Earth's defenses, their weapons striking with unerring precision. The Earth fleet's shields flickered under the pressure, but they held. For now. Direct hit on the starboard side. An officer called out, his voice filled with panic. Rayner's jaw tightened. "Status on the supercharged weapon." "It's still charging, sir," Helen replied, her voice trained. "It'll be ready in just a few more seconds." "Not fast enough," Rayner muttered, his mind racing. "We need to buy more time." As the enemy fleet pressed forward, Rayner's thoughts turned to the strange alien commander, Lord Calfer. The warning had been clear. Earth was not just facing another battle, but an enemy with the power to crush them. And yet, humanity had not backed down. They were fighting with everything they had. But would it be enough? Outside, the battle was growing more intense. Earth's fighters zoomed through the chaos, engaging the alien vessels in close combat. Each movement was a deadly dance, as ships darted between blasts, trying to outmaneuver the superior alien ships. But despite their best efforts, the enemy was relentless. Every time a ship was taken down, 2 more seemed to appear in its place. In the midst of the chaos, Rayner's communicator beeped. It was a message from Joseph, the lead engineer. "Rayner, the weapon is ready." Joseph's voice crackled through the speaker. "But we need to get closer. We have to hit the enemy command ship, or it's useless." Rayner's heart raced. The command ship, the key to the entire fleet. If they could take it down, they might just have a chance. But it was deep within the enemy formation, surrounded by layers of protection. "Get us in range," Rayner ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. "We can't afford to wait any longer." The Earth fleet surged forward, pushing through the chaos. Rayner's fingers tightened on the armrest of his command chair as the flagship entered the heart of the enemy's formation. The alien ships were everywhere, but the command ship stood out, towering above the rest like a dark, looming monolith. Helen worked quickly at her station, her fingers flying across the controls. "We're in range, sir," she said, ready to fire the weapon. Rayner nodded. "Do it." The supercharged energy weapon fired with a deafening roar. A beam of pure energy shot out, cutting through the darkness of space like a knife. It hit one of the alien ships, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The massive vessel began to disintegrate, its shields shattered, and its hull ripped apart by the sheer force of the blast. But Rayner's victory was short-lived. The enemy fleet reacted quickly, their remaining ships converging on Earth's fleet in a desperate attempt to retaliate. The atmosphere on the bridge grew tense as the battle entered its most dangerous phase. "We've done damage, but it's not enough," Rayner said, his eyes fixed on the screen. We need to hit the command ship. It's their nerve center. As the Earth fleet closed in on the command ship, Raynor could see the enemy's defenses scrambling to protect it. Energy shields shimmered, blocking incoming fire, while drones and fighter ships swarmed to intercept any threats. "Prepare to fire again," Raynor ordered, his voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "We can't give them a chance to regroup." Raynor's fingers hovered over the control panel. The enemy ships were closing in fast, but they couldn't turn back now. The command ship loomed just ahead, and with one well-placed strike, they could cripple the enemy's entire fleet. Helen's voice broke the silence. "Sir, we've got incoming. They're coming in too fast." Raynor's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the approaching enemy ships. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. If they didn't act now, everything they had fought for would be lost. "Fire!" Raynor shouted. The energy weapon shot forward once again, this time with all its might. It tore through the darkness, slamming into the command ship's shields. For a moment, nothing happened. The shield shimmered, buckling under the force of the blast. Then, with a thunderous crack, the shield collapsed. The beam tore into the heart of the command ship, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, its core ripped apart by the immense power of the weapon. Raynor watched as the enemy ships began to falter, their movements growing erratic. Without their command ship, the fleet was falling apart. "Target their remaining ships," Raynor ordered. "Finish them off." The Earth fleet launched one final wave of attacks, hammering the enemy's remaining vessels. As the alien ships began to retreat, the Earth fleet pressed forward, finishing off the stragglers with precision. But the victory felt hollow. Raynor knew this was only the beginning. The alien empire, though fractured for now, was far from defeated. And the mysterious threat that Lord Calthor had warned about still loomed on the horizon. "We've won this battle," Raynor said quietly, his eyes scanning the stars. "But the war is far from over." The final gambit. The remnants of the Earth fleet drifted through the void of space, their ships battered and scarred from the fierce battle. The stars around them seemed to twinkle in mocking silence, as if the universe itself was watching with interest. Raynor stood on the bridge, staring out into the endless expanse of space, his mind heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. The destruction of the alien command ship had been a monumental victory. It had crippled the enemy's ability to coordinate their forces, sending their fleet into disarray. But even with the chaos, the human fleet couldn't afford to rest. The warning from Lord Calthor echoed in Raynor's mind. "You've awoken something far more dangerous than you can imagine." Raynor didn't fully understand what Calthor meant by those words, but deep down, he felt an undeniable unease. The Empire, shattered as it seemed, had left one final message, a cryptic promise of something worse. In the command center, Helen and Joseph exchanged nervous glances. Both of them had seen the same thing, the final transmission from Calthor. They all understood what it meant. The aliens may have been temporarily beaten, but they were far from finished. And if they truly had a more terrifying force waiting in the wings, humanity would need to be prepared. "We need to regroup, Raynor." Helen spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Our fleet's barely holding together. We need time to repair, rearm, and replan. If there's something worse coming, we don't have much time." Raynor turned to face her, his gaze hardening. "We don't have the luxury of time. If we stop now, whatever is coming will catch us off guard. We need to be on the offensive. We need to finish this once and for all." Joseph nodded in agreement. "I can begin repairs on the ships, but we'll need resources, Raynor. If this new enemy is as powerful as Calthor suggests, we can't afford to go into the next fight without everything we've got." The tension in the air was palpable. Raynor understood the stakes. But what worried him even more was the mystery of Calthor's words. What could possibly be worse than the alien fleet they had just fought? The thought gnawed at him. "We'll do what we can," Raynor said finally. But we need to find out what Calfor meant. I want to know what's coming. It's the only way we'll be ready. Days passed in a blur of frantic repairs, updates, and briefings. The fleet had regrouped, but the atmosphere on the ships was anything but celebratory. The victory over the alien fleet felt more like a temporary reprieve than a true triumph. The damage was heavy, and morale was low, but the humanity's resolve had never been stronger. In the meantime, Rayner and his team worked tirelessly to decrypt the alien data they had managed to recover from the battle. They sifted through intercepted communications and sensor data, hoping to find a clue, anything, that would reveal the true nature of the new threat that Calfor had warned about. The data they recovered was fragmented at best, but one transmission stood out, a cryptic message, barely decipherable, that appeared to come from deep within the alien empire. It mentioned something called the Enforcers, a mysterious faction that even Calfor feared. "This is it," Rayner muttered, his eyes widening as he read the translated message aloud to the team. "The Enforcers. Who are they? And why does Calfor fear them?" Helen leaned over Rayner's shoulder, squinting at the data. "There's not much here. But the Enforcers, that's not something we've ever encountered in their records. If they're as powerful as Calfor says, then they must be some kind of elite force." Joseph crossed his arms, his face darkening. "We don't know who they are, but they're clearly a threat. And Calfor's not the kind of alien to back down from anything unless it's truly dangerous." Rayner's hand clenched into a fist. "Then we need to find them before they find us." A week later, the Earth fleet was once again ready for action. Repairs were complete, and all remaining resources were consolidated into a single strike force. Rayner had made the decision to take the offensive. The key to defeating this new enemy was to strike first, before they could gain strength. The fleet set course for the deepest, most heavily fortified regions of alien space, the territory where Calfor's forces had come from. Rayner was determined to learn the truth about the Enforcers and take the fight to them before they could arrive at Earth. The journey through alien space was a perilous one. The fleet navigated through asteroid fields, nebulae, and ancient debris fields left from long-forgotten battles. It was a quiet, uneasy journey, with nothing but the hum of engines and the occasional warning light breaking the silence. Rayner sat in the command center, watching the star maps as they progressed. His mind was focused, but it wasn't just the Enforcers he worried about. There were still unanswered questions. Why had Calfor, a once mighty and feared general, been so willing to warn Earth? And what had he meant by, "This is just the beginning"? The answers were out there, but they wouldn't come without a price. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the fleet arrived at the coordinates Calfor had left them. The area was eerily quiet, as if something ancient and powerful lingered in the shadows. Rayner's heart beat faster as he ordered the fleet to drop out of warp. "Everyone stay alert," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Whatever we're about to face, we face it together." As the fleet settled into position, the first signs of the true threat emerged. From the depths of the darkness came a fleet unlike any Rayner had seen before, sleek, black ships that seemed to absorb the light around them. They were silent, deadly, and without mercy. Rayner's gut tightened. The Enforcers had arrived, and the true battle for humanity's future was about to begin.